We have some pictures of Roger Stone arriving just a few minutes ago. He will testify today for the House Intelligence Committee. This in the Russia election meddling investigation. Manu Raju up on the Hill for an update. Manu.
Yeah, that's right. Roger Stone, President Trump's 40-year friend and advisor, just entered this secure committee room. And this coming as Democrats have long wanted to question him because of his reputation largely as a political trickster. But I can tell you that I read through his very lengthy statement that he provided to this committee and released publicly. And he really tries to settle a number of scores, going after Democratic lawmakers by name, demanding public apologies from Adam Schiff, the top Democrat on the committee, Jackie Speier, another Democrat on the committee, and Eric Swalwell as well, saying that they have maligned his name and that he, quote, resents any suggestion that he colluded with Russia. Now, there are a couple of instances in particular that Democrats have long wanted to question him about, as well as whether or not he's had any connections with Julian Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks, and whether or not he had any advanced knowledge of that DNC hack. He firmly denied both in this very combative public statement. Democrats in particular also want to question him about why he did not provide documents to this committee. I'm told by sources that he did not provide any documents about his records with Russians, and one reason why, a source tells me, is because there were no public private communications about any communications that he had with Russians, no records, private records, only public. Anything he did, he said they released publicly, including a Twitter exchange that he had with the alleged Russian hacker Guccifer 2 about, they had a direct message exchange on Twitter, an innocuous exchange in Roger Stone's words, and something that he released publicly. But expect him to come out and answer questions afterwards. As he went in, John, I asked him the message he wants to send to the committee. He said the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. John.
Manu Raju, a flair for the dramatic from Roger Stone. Thank you very, very much. Huge power outages, shortages of the most basic necessities. This morning, the president receives a briefing on the suffering in Puerto Rico. 6 days since Hurricane Maria hit. Power still out for most of the island. Food scarce, water scarce. CNN's Lela Santiago on the ground in Puerto Rico.
This woman doesn't even know who I am, but I'm the first person she's seen land here since Hurricane Maria battered the island. The floods, the debris, the lack of power, all making already hard to get to areas even tougher to reach. Even FEMA hasn't set foot in some parts of Puerto Rico. We took a chopper from San Juan to remote areas largely unseen, like a small town next to the Oaxaca Dam on the northwest part of the island. The dam has been breached, and the government ordered 70,000 nearby residents to evacuate. It is here in nearby Quebradillas where I was met with such emotion, the people starving for assistance.
She says if something happens to that dam, that could be just as bad as the hurricane itself.
Communications are so poor, many are asking us to send messages to their families. From the air, you can see why more than 3 million U.S. citizens could remain in the dark for months.
This is the problem. This is why Puerto Rico, 100% of the island, doesn't have power right now. Granted, the infrastructure was vulnerable before Maria passed by, but you can see with these power lines down what the challenge is. They're completely collapsed.
Heading further inland toward Utuado, the death toll is among the highest here. This is where we meet 56-year-old Rosario Heredia. She is diabetic, just had surgery, and is unemployed. Now, she doesn't have a home either. This is what Maria did to her home. Water spewing from every corner. By now, she thought help would have arrived. It hasn't. She's hopeful that someone will help her to be able to rebuild this. Flying south to even more remote Yauco. The roads are blocked, forcing us to find another way to get to this home. Coffee growers Gaspar Rodriguez and Doris Velez tell us the problem here is food. Most of what they have left has gone bad. He says you work and work and work, and it's for nothing because he's lost everything. A common theme on an island of 3.4 million U.S. citizens, now waiting and hoping that help is on the way. And John, I actually just had a conversation with the mayor. She pulled me aside. She was sobbing in tears. This is the mayor of San Juan, and she says we need help, specifically in the hospital. She says last night 2 people died in a hospital, in intensive care unit, because they couldn't get diesel to that hospital in time. So no generators. In the meantime, she says she has hospitals in San Juan that are hours away from being without power.
Lola Santiago, thank you very much for the update. Thank you for your reporting. We are grateful, and I know the people of Puerto Rico are grateful as well. One day after North Korea says it can now shoot down U.S. planes because the United States has declared war, that country moves military equipment to its coast. Stay with us. New this morning, North Korea moving planes and boosting its defenses along the coast. This comes one day after the country's foreign minister says that North Korea now has the right to shoot down U.S. planes because of a statement by President Trump that he says amounted to a declaration of war. The White House calls that conclusion absurd. Joining me now to talk about this, General Wesley Clark, former NATO Supreme Allied Commander. He wrote the foreword to this special edition United States Armed Forces Salute to America's Heroes. General, thanks so much for being with us. How concerned are you about this escalation? When you hear a senior North Korean official say the U.S. has declared war, that sounds alarming.
Well, it is alarming. That's the typical North Korean response to anything that the United States does that pushes them. So when they say that, though, we have to take that seriously, because as we see now, they're moving assets and so forth. We don't want them to shoot down one of our airplanes. If they try to do this, though, I'm sure that we have the right of self-defense. We'll go back at them, and this will further ratchet up the escalation. What we really need is we need behind-the-scenes diplomacy to cut down the escalation, because there's no advantage gained in starting a low-level conflict here.
Are you concerned about the possibility of an accidental conflict with this rhetoric being the background?
Well, the accidental conflict could occur by, let's say, some trigger-happy North Korean missile man thinking he's obeying the dear leader's instructions and shooting down an American aircraft or shooting at an American aircraft, in which case we respond by taking out the missile site. And that could lead to something. I don't think that would lead to an accidental war, but war by miscalculation is misunderstanding the intent of the other side. It's very dangerous in Korea right now.
Look, the exact statement that the North Korean foreign minister was referring to, where he said that he believed the president declared war, is when the president wrote on Twitter that North Korea won't be around much longer. How, you know, what should they infer? What should the North Koreans infer from that message?
Well, I think the North Koreans are pretty smart in terms of interpreting American politics. So I think that inside the North Korean government, they do understand what this is about. This is about playing to a domestic base. This is about a lot of braggadocio. This is about trying to ratchet up a crisis without starting a war. This may be about trying to pressure China. But North Korea, by virtue of the way they operate, they never take a threat. They never take it without ratcheting back up the escalation. That's the way the North always responds.
In moving the planes, moving the defenses to the coast. It's not far from where the U.S. planes fly. When they fly, what message does that send?
Well, it's one more step up the escalation ladder toward, as you suggest, an accidental war or a war by miscalculation. It's not reducing the chances of catastrophe in Korea. It's increasing them. And this is why we've said for a long time the right thing to do is not to scale up the rhetoric. It's to work behind the scenes. This is what we did in the Clinton administration. When we got the original framework agreement in 1994, we were at almost the same position. We were talking about moving aircraft. The North Koreans were talking about if you put an embargo in through the UN, it's an act of war. What we did instead, President Clinton sent President Jimmy Carter over, and we cut the thing off. That could be done now, but has it been done? We don't know.
I want to ask you about something completely different, Iran, and something the president wrote over the weekend. He wrote this. He said, Iran just test-fired a ballistic missile capable of reaching Israel. They are also working with North Korea. Not much of an agreement we have. So military officials tell CNN over the weekend they have no evidence that Iran did a ballistic missile launch over the weekend. Is the president getting information that the military is not getting? Does the president have to be more careful with his claims on Twitter? Maybe he was referring to something from months ago?
Well, I think there was something in the press that wasn't correct that the president might have seen. But the point is, if you go back and look at this, take it back to 2002, when President George W. Bush declared an axis of evil, he grouped these three countries, Iraq, Iran, and North Korea, together. And sure enough, they've worked together since then. We went after the country that was the weakest and easiest to take care of in going into Iraq, and we made a big mess of it. And now President Trump is building on that sort of public lingering memory of linking geostrategy and morality to create crises and to whip up his base. This is extremely dangerous for the United States and for the world, and I'd like to see us resolve these problems with real leadership and real diplomacy.
General Wesley Clark, great to have you here with us. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. In just minutes, we're going to hear from President Trump at the White House. What will he talk about? Will he talk about the crisis in Puerto Rico, or will the fixation be on NFL rules?